Imagine standing at the base of the Great Pyramid, staring up at 4,500 years of unanswered questions. How did a civilization without modern tools achieve such precision? The gaps between these massive stones are so tight not even a razor blade can slip through. What secrets did the Egyptians know that we've forgotten? Let's uncover the mysteries hidden in these ancient stones. The desert stretches endlessly, empty except for the pyramid looming ahead. Nothing prepares you for the scale of it. Even from miles away, its shape dominates the horizon, rising sharply from the flat expanse of sand. When you get closer, details emerge. The precise edges, the way the limestone catches the sunlight, how the entire structure seems to push against the sky. Originally standing 481 feet tall, the Great Pyramid was the tallest man-made structure in the world for 38 centuries. It's made of over 2.3 million blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, some as heavy as 80 tons. Stack those stones up and they could circle 2/3 of the Earth's equator. Modern skyscrapers dwarf it in height, but none match its precision. It sits on a base covering 13 acres, leveled to within half an inch of perfect flatness. Builders today couldn't achieve that without lasers. Tourists often describe the first moment they see it as ancient but overwhelming. Some admit they expected something smaller, something rougher. Instead, they find a structure so mathematically exact that even now, engineers argue about how it was possible. There are no records explaining its construction, no blueprints, no worker's manual, just gaps in history where techniques should be. Walking toward it, the silence feels heavy. Wind scratches at the stones, but the pyramid stands unmoved, weathered but unbroken after 46 centuries. The closer you get, the more absurd its existence feels. How does something this massive make so little sense? Each tier of limestone fits so tightly that gaps between blocks measure less than a millimeter in places. No mortar holds them together, just perfect cuts that locked into position. Teams have tried to replicate the construction methods with modern tools and failed. Mainstream archaeology says ramps, but ramp theories don't quite fit. A straight ramp would require materials equal to the pyramid itself, and a spiral ramp around the structure would leave no room for maneuvering multi-ton blocks. Workers supposedly hauled stones on sleds across wet sand, but tests show that method fails at higher tiers. Something's missing. Look at the precision again. The pyramid's sides align almost perfectly with true north. It's off by just 0.05 degrees. Historians keep saying Bronze Age tools couldn't achieve this. Yet there it is. The stones were transported from quarries 500 miles away, shaped and placed in a way that defies simple crane movements today. Visitors sometimes joke about aliens, but the truth is weirder. We might just have forgotten something. The pyramid wasn't built in isolation. It came from a civilization that tracked star movements with eerie accuracy. Maybe their knowledge ran deeper than we thought. For now, Khufu's tomb stays silent. The pyramid still stands, after empires rose and fell, after wars buried cities and technology reshaped the world. Its stones don't just sit, they wait. There's more buried inside these chambers, and each new discovery makes history books even less certain. Up next, why priests and architects saw pyramids not just as tombs, but as stairways to gods. To the ancient Egyptians, the Great Pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a launch pad to the stars. Pharaohs weren't just kings, they were living gods who needed a direct line to the afterlife. That's why the pyramid's design goes beyond basic engineering. Every corridor, every chamber, even the angle of the walls, was calculated to help the pharaoh's soul ascend. The so-called burial chamber, it wasn't just a room, it was a celestial waiting area designed to transform the dead ruler into something divine. This wasn't a job for half-hearted effort. The Egyptians believed the afterlife was a dangerous trip with obstacles and tests, and the pyramid was packed with hieroglyphs and rituals meant to guide the pharaoh through it. The pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings in the world, are carved inside later pyramids, full of spells to help the dead king navigate. The Great Pyramid's layout mirrors the Duat, the underworld the pharaoh had to cross. Even the air shafts inside aren't just ventilation. They're aligned with specific stars, like the North Star in Orion's belt, acting as pathways for the soul. And then there's the math. The angles, the precision of the chambers, the way the whole structure lines up. This wasn't random. The descending passage slopes at 26 degrees, matching celestial movements, important in their mythology. The king's chamber, built with 100-ton granite blocks stacked with near-zero gaps, wasn't just sturdy. It was a kind of resonance chamber, built to amplify rituals. Some research suggests the shape of the pyramid itself might have interacted with sound in ways we're only starting to test today. But here's the thing, all of this is theory. Texts and carvings give hints, but nothing spells out exactly why they built it this way. Some scholars think certain chambers connect to star positions from 10,000 BCE, long before any Egyptian dynasty. Others argue the pyramid might have been a machine designed to generate or focus energy. It's easy to brush that off as fringe, but then how do you explain the precision? The interior chambers were measured to millimeter-level accuracy. Even the air shafts, which seem random at a glance, align with celestial bodies at exact points in history. The workers who built this? They weren't just hauling stones. They were following a blueprint we've lost. Every cut was about more than architecture. It was about ensuring the pharaoh didn't just die, but transformed. The tunnels, shafts, and chambers created paths for the soul, aligned to stars that represented gods. The pyramid wasn't just a structure, it was a map to the afterlife. Still, the real question isn't just why they built it, it's how they knew to build it like this. The math, the astronomy, the engineering, pyramids from later dynasties are actually worse in quality. It's like they peaked early and forgot the formula. That raises another possibility. What if Khufu's pyramid wasn't just the start of something, but a leftover from something older? One thing's clear. This wasn't a vanity project. Every detail served a purpose lost to time. And the people building it? They weren't slaves dragging blocks for some dead king. They were craftsmen, priests, laborers working on what they believed was a divine machine. Next up, the truth about who actually built it, and why everything you've heard about thousands of slaves is probably wrong. Hollywood got it wrong. The pyramids weren't built by slaves cracking whips under the desert sun. The truth? They were built by skilled workers who got paid, ate well, and even had health care. Archaeologists found their villages just a mile from the pyramids, neat rows of houses, bakeries, and breweries. These weren't slave quarters. They were work camps for a rotating labor force, complete with medical facilities where broken bones were set and wounds treated. Take the workers' graves. Skeletons show signs of healed injuries, not the brutal treatment you'd expect from slave labor. Some even had surgical amputations, meaning they got care, not punishment. The bones also reveal something else. These people ate meat regularly. Slaves in ancient Egypt typically lived on bread and beer, but pyramid workers had beef, fish, and poultry. Payroll records found at the site list workers getting rations of grain, oil, and cloth. This wasn't exploitation, it was a national project with benefits. The workforce wasn't the 100,000 slaves Herodotus claimed either. Modern estimates put it closer to 20,000, a mix of skilled masons, engineers, and seasonal laborers. Most were farmers who worked on the pyramids during the Nile floods, when their fields were underwater. The flooding made construction easier too. Waterways formed temporary canals, letting workers float stone blocks right to the site. It was a system so efficient that later pharaohs couldn't replicate it. Their pyramids were smaller and sloppier. Work schedules were surprisingly modern. Laborers worked in rotating shifts, with teams named things like Friends of Khufu or Drunkards of Menkore. Graffiti inside the pyramids proves it. Workers left notes like, "We did this in 18 days," and complaints about hangovers. They weren't slaves. They were proud craftsmen. Even the tools tell a story. Copper chisels, wooden sleds, and limestone measuring rods have been found in the ruins of their workshops. These weren't primitive hacks. They were precision instruments, sharpened and maintained by specialists. The scale of organization was staggering. Every day, 1,000 loaves of bread and 100 jugs of beer were baked for the workforce. Fish arrived from the Nile, cattle were butchered on site, and scribes kept track of everything. Workers lived in dormitories, slept on reed mats, and even had their own cemeteries. When they died, they were buried with jars of food and tools, honors you wouldn't give to slaves. But here's the twist. This system only worked because of the Nile. The floods didn't just provide workers, they made transport possible. Giant stones were hauled on wooden sleds over wet sand, which reduced friction by half. Barges carried limestone from quarries hundreds of miles away. The river was their highway, their calendar, and their HR department. Without it, the pyramids couldn't have been built. So why does the slave myth persist? Blame the Greeks. Herodotus visited Egypt 2,000 years after the pyramids were built and assumed they were tombs built by oppressed masses. The Bible didn't help either. Exodus framed Egypt as a land of slave drivers. But archaeology doesn't lie. The workers' villages, the bones, the payrolls, they all point to a society that could mobilize people without chains. That doesn't mean it was easy. Workers still died, accidents happened, and the labor was backbreaking. But it wasn't slavery. It was a mix of duty, faith, and good old-fashioned employment. The pyramids weren't just tombs. They were public works projects, like ancient versions of highways or dams. And the workers, they were the ones who made the impossible happen. One block, one loaf of bread, one healed fracture at a time. Now about those blocks. How do you move a 2.5-ton stone up a pyramid without cranes? The answer might be simpler and weirder than you think. The ramp theory sounds simple enough at first. Just build a slope and drag stones up it. But when you crunch the numbers, things start falling apart. Mainstream archaeology favors a few variations. Straight ramps, zigzag ramps, or spiral ramps winding around the pyramid. Each version has the same glaring problem. None fully explain how workers moved blocks weighing multiple tons to a height of 481 feet without modern machinery. Take the straight ramp idea. To maintain a manageable slope of about 8 degrees, the ramp would need to stretch nearly a mile in length. That's not just a logistical nightmare. It requires more material than the pyramid itself. Builders would have had to quarry and move an extra 4 million cubic yards of limestone just for the ramp. Where's that debris now? No trace has been found. Even if they dismantled the ramp afterward, there'd be evidence of it. Cracks in the pyramid's facing stones from ramp removal or leftover rubble. There isn't any. The spiral ramp theory seems smarter. Less material, more compact. But here's the catch. As the pyramid grows taller, the corners become too tight for maneuvering massive blocks. Testing this with scale models shows teams would have struggled to pivot 2.5-ton stones around 90-degree turns on a narrow, steep incline. Plus, the pyramid's perfect symmetry would be near impossible to maintain when workers couldn't see alignment markers hidden beneath a spiraling construction path. Zigzag ramps? Slightly better, but still problematic. These ramps would have required a complex system of switchbacks and landings. Experiments show workers needed at least 25 men to pull a single 2.5-ton block up a 10-degree incline, but coordinating that many people on a zigzag path? would have been chaotic. And again, no physical evidence of these ramps exists in the archaeological record. Here's another issue: friction. Even with water-reducing sand resistance, wooden sledges wore out fast under such loads. Replicas disintegrate after a few test runs. The Egyptians would have needed thousands of replacement sledges, yet almost none have been found near Giza. And that doesn't account for the granite blocks in the king's chamber, some weighing 80 tons. Hauling those up any ramp would have required a force equivalent to 1,200 men pulling simultaneously. Modern engineers have tried to recreate these methods. In 1997, a team using ancient techniques took 3 weeks to move a single 2.5-ton block, meaning Khufu's pyramid would have taken 150 years to build at that pace. Even with 20,000 workers, the math doesn't add up. Archaeologist Mark Lehner's experiments showed that teams using ramps progressed at about 10 feet per hour on flat ground, slower than a snail's pace when scaled to pyramid heights. Then there's the workforce problem. Herodotus claimed 100,000 men worked on the pyramids, but the Giza plateau couldn't have supported that many. Estimates based on worker village remains suggest 20,000 at most. Spread across ramp construction, block hauling, and precision fitting, that's not enough hands to make ramp theory plausible within Khufu's 23-year reign. Enter thing. Opponents of ramp theories point to the pyramid's interior. If external ramps were used, why are there no stress marks on the outer casing stones from ramp removal? Why does the internal structure show signs of stones being placed from the inside out? Some researchers, like Jean-Pierre Houdin, argue for internal ramps, but these would have been too narrow for the largest blocks. The biggest red flag? Later pyramids built with ramps are visibly sloppier. If ramps were the go-to method, why did construction quality decline instead of improve? It's as if the best technique was forgotten soon after Giza. Contest. So where does that leave us? Either we're missing a critical piece of the ramp puzzle, or the Egyptians used something else entirely. Maybe the answer isn't in the dirt, but in the stones themselves, and the eerie precision with which they fit together. Contest. Excuse me. Next, how a crack in a granite box might reveal the pyramid builder's real secret. The precision of the Great Pyramid's construction doesn't just impress, it baffles. Each stone fits so tightly that modern engineers struggle to explain how Bronze Age builders achieved it without advanced tools. The base spans 755.75 feet per side, varying by less than 2 inches across its entire length. That's like laying out a football field with an error margin thinner than a pencil. The pyramid's original height reached 481.4 feet. But it's the angles that really unsettle experts. The sides align to true north with a deviation of just 3/60ths of a degree. Even with GPS, replicating that today would require multiple corrections. The interior passages amplify the mystery. The descending corridor slopes at exactly 26 degrees, an angle that mirrors celestial movements critical to Egyptian astronomy. The Grand Gallery's corbelled ceiling locks together without mortar, each block precisely cut to redistribute the pyramid's crushing weight. In the king's chamber, granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons fit together with gaps measuring less than 0.02 inches. Modern masons using diamond-tipped tools can't match that precision on softer stone. Then there's the math encoded in the dimensions. Divide the pyramid's perimeter by twice its height, and you get 3.1416, pi accurate to 4 decimal places. This wasn't formally calculated in Europe until 2,000 years later. The golden ratio appears too, seen in the relationship between the height and base. Some call this coincidence, but the frequency is suspicious. The pyramid's slope angle of 52 degrees creates a height-to-base ratio matching the golden ratio's square root. Too many accidents for something supposedly built with ropes and copper chisels. Modern construction comparisons make it stranger. The Burj Khalifa, today's tallest building, has a 2-inch tolerance for every 100 feet. The Great Pyramid achieves better precision with stones 10 times heavier. Laser scanning reveals the pyramid's foundation is level within 0.004%, superior to most modern skyscrapers. Engineers point out that even slight errors in such a massive structure would compound catastrophically. Yet after 4,500 years, the pyramid hasn't settled or skewed. Whatever methods they used, they understood load distribution better than we do. The granite boxes in the subterranean chamber push credibility further. Each weighs 100 tons, precision cut with right angles accurate within 0.01 degrees. No modern quarry could produce such perfect cubes at that scale without computer-guided saws. Microscopic analysis shows the cutting marks suggest something harder than copper tools was used. Some researchers propose lost abrasives or crystal-tip drills, but no evidence supports this. Even more puzzling, later pyramids lack this precision. Djoser's step pyramid, built earlier, shows crude masonry. Subsequent pyramids at Dashur tilt and bulge. It's as if the knowledge peaked at Giza and then degraded. This isn't how technology normally progresses. Normally, methods improve over time, not vanish. Alternative theories bubble up under the weight of these inconsistencies. Could the Egyptians have inherited techniques from an older civilization? The water erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggest it might predate dynastic Egypt. Maybe Khufu's builders repurposed forgotten technology. Others point to the pyramid's potential acoustic properties. Tests show the king's chamber resonates at frequencies that affect human brainwaves. Coincidence or intentional design? Mainstream archaeology insists the pyramid was built with simple tools and brute force. But the numbers refuse to cooperate. You can't achieve micrometer precision by eyeballing measurements. The absence of trial and error prototypes is telling, too. There are no practice pyramids with sloppy joints. They built perfection on the first attempt. The real shock isn't that they aligned it to stars or calculated pi. It's that they did it without leaving behind the tools or documents that should accompany such knowledge. Either we've dramatically underestimated ancient Egyptian technology, or we're missing a piece of the puzzle that's staring us in the face. Up next, a 2,000-year-old account of wooden machines that could change everything. If it's true, Herodotus wrote about the pyramids 2,000 years after they were built, which means he was about as far removed from Khufu as we are from Julius Caesar. His account mentions machines of wood used to lift stones, but he never explains what these look like or how they worked. That vague description has fueled debates ever since. If these machines existed, why haven't we found any remnants? No wooden cranes, no pulley systems, not even tool marks that suggest their use. Modern archaeology suggests Herodotus exaggerated plenty. His claim of 100,000 workers doesn't match the evidence. Worker villages near Giza could only support about 20,000. But his machine reference is harder to dismiss completely. Wood decays, so absence of evidence isn't proof the machines never existed. The problem is, even if they did, simple wooden devices shouldn't have been capable of lifting 80-ton granite blocks to the pyramid's upper chambers. Some scholars think Herodotus might have been describing counterweight systems or lever mechanisms. There's a Babylonian text from the same era describing a lifting machine using woven ropes and beams, but nothing that scales to pyramid-sized blocks. Others argue the machines were just sledges and ramps, basic tools gussied up in translation over centuries. Except ramps don't explain the precision we see in the stone fittings. Sledges don't account for the perfect angles. Medieval Arabic writers added their own spin. Al-Makrizi recorded local legends about the pyramids being built by a pre-flood civilization using magic spells and strange devices. Another account claims the stones were softened with an alchemical liquid before being placed. These sound like tall tales, but they underscore a persistent theme. Even centuries later, people couldn't believe ordinary methods created the pyramids. The real sticking point is Khufu's reign. If he ruled for about 23 years as historians believe, builders would have needed to set one 2.5-ton block every 2.5 minutes during daylight hours to finish on time. That pace rules out slow manual methods. Either the timeline is wrong, the workforce was vastly larger than evidence shows, or, and this is what keeps alternative theorists up at night, they had access to techniques we still don't understand. There's an uncomfortable gap between what the pyramids required and what Bronze Age technology supposedly offered. The precision stonework implies advanced measuring tools, yet we've only found simple cubit rods. The weight distribution suggests engineering knowledge that shouldn't exist for another 2,000 years. Even if Herodotus's machines were just levers and sledges, how did they achieve results modern engineers struggle to replicate? One theory suggests that the machines weren't mechanical at all, but sonic. Certain frequencies can make sand flow like liquid, or cause objects to vibrate in ways that reduce friction. Maybe the wooden machines were resonance chambers, or acoustic lifts. It sounds wild, but labs today are experimenting with sonic levitation, just not at pyramid scales. The silence is deafening. No construction diagrams, no technical manuals, just Herodotus's throwaway line about wooden machines and a pile of unanswered questions. Later pyramids, built with documented ramp systems, are visibly cruder. It's as if the best techniques vanished shortly after Giza. Maybe the machines did exist, rotted away, and took their secrets with them. Or maybe Herodotus misunderstood what Egyptian guides told him. Either way, his brief mention cracks open a door to possibilities mainstream archaeology hasn't fully closed. The lack of evidence isn't proof, it's just another layer of the mystery. Next, what if the real secret wasn't how they moved the stones, but how they made them? A controversial theory suggests we've been looking at the blocks all wrong. The idea that sound could move massive stone blocks sounds like science fiction, but modern labs actually demonstrate how it works. Today, researchers can suspend small objects in midair using focused sound waves. The technology is called acoustic levitation, and it relies on precisely tuned frequencies to create pressure zones that cancel gravity's pull. Scale that up, and you've got a theoretical way to move pyramid stones. But could the Egyptians have known this? They certainly understood sound's power. Archaeologists have found Egyptian harps, flutes, and percussion instruments dating back to pyramid building times. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was woven into religion and rituals. Temple inscriptions describe harmonic spells, and some pyramid texts mention voices that shake the earth. Whether this was poetic language or something more practical is unclear, but it shows sound held deep significance. The king's chamber adds fuel to the theory. Its granite walls and empty sarcophagus create unusual acoustics. When you clap inside, echoes bounce in strange patterns. Some researchers claim the chamber resonates at 440 Hz, a frequency modern science links to altered mental states. Others point out that the entire pyramid might act like a giant sound chamber, with internal passages focusing vibrations to specific points. There's no direct proof this was intentional, but the coincidence is eerie. Native American and Tibetan traditions offer parallels. Tibetan monks have long used low-frequency chanting to vibrate heavy stones into position during construction. The Paiute tribe's oral history describes ancestors moving rocks with song and intent. These practices don't prove the Egyptians did the same, but they show multiple cultures explored sound's physical effects. Modern experiments suggest how it might work. Scientists have moved centimeter-sized objects using ultrasonic speakers, but scaling up faces huge hurdles. The energy required to levitate even a 1-ton stone would deafen nearby workers. Still, some theorists propose the Egyptians used harmonic resonance differently, not to lift blocks, but to weaken friction. Vibrating a stone at its natural frequency can make it temporarily lighter, reducing the force needed to slide it. Tests show sand under vibration flows like liquid, which aligns with accounts of workers pouring water to ease sled movement. Another angle: the pyramid's construction materials. The limestone casing stones contained high amounts of crystalline quartz, a mineral that generates electric charge under pressure. The biggest problem? Lack of physical evidence. No sonic tools have been found in workers' villages, and no hieroglyphs depict sound-based construction. But that's the constant puzzle with Giza. The best techniques leave the fewest traces. Ropes rot, wooden machines decay, and knowledge passed orally disappears. Exciting. Mainstream archaeology dismisses the sound hypothesis as speculation, and they're not wrong, there's no smoking gun. But consider this: later pyramids built with documented ramp systems are visibly cruder. If ramps were the best method, why didn't technique improve over time? Unless the early builders had something else. Maybe sound wasn't the sole answer, but part of a larger system. Combined with precise geometry, trained labor, and seasonal Nile floods, acoustic tricks could have given Egyptians an edge we're only starting to understand. Or maybe we're projecting modern physics onto ancient minds. Either way, the pyramid's acoustics remain, and they're still humming with questions. Up next, why the pyramid's air shafts point directly at stars that hadn't held that position for 12,000 years. The astronomical connections get even stranger. The pyramids don't just sit on the desert, they map the stars. Look at Giza's 3 main pyramids from above, and you'll notice their layout mirrors Orion's belt. Not roughly, not approximately, but with deliberate precision. The 2 largest pyramids align with the belt's brightest stars, Al-Natak and Al-Nilam, while the smaller one matches Mintaka's offset position. This isn't some happy accident. The Egyptians called Orion Sahu, the celestial form of Osiris, their god of death and rebirth. The message is clear: these weren't just tombs, they were launch pads for pharaohs joining the cosmos. Birthdays, but here's where things get weird. When you factor in precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that changes star positions over millennia, the alignment gets even tighter. Today the match isn't perfect, but rewind to 10,500 BC and the pyramids line up with Orion's belt almost exactly. That's 8,000 years before Khufu supposedly built the Great Pyramid. Mainstream archaeology brushes this off as coincidence, but the math doesn't lie. The odds of this precise alignment happening randomly are astronomical. The Sphinx adds another layer. During that same 10,500 BC period, it would have faced due east at dawn on the spring equinox, directly at the constellation Leo. Not just any Leo, but a version that perfectly mirrored the Sphinx's original form. Some researchers think the monument started as a lion before being recarved into a pharaoh's likeness. The granite stela between its paws even mentions renovations, hinting at an older structure underneath. Egyptian astronomy wasn't primitive. Temple ceilings depict star charts with uncanny accuracy. The pyramid's air shafts point directly at Sirius and Orion's belt during specific eras, like targeting scopes locked on celestial bodies. One shaft in the Great Pyramid aligns with Thuban, the North Star, in 2500 BC. Another targets Sirius precisely when it reappeared after 70 days hidden by the sun, a key event in their calendar. These aren't ventilation shafts, they're star clocks. Consider what this implies. The pyramid builders knew Earth's axial precession cycle lasts 25,920 years. They tracked stars so precisely they could memorialize positions from thousands of years before their time. Modern science didn't calculate precession until Hipparchus in 134 BC, and even then he got the cycle length wrong. The Egyptians either inherited knowledge from a much older culture or developed astronomy far beyond what we've credited them for. The sheer scale of the astronomical design is staggering. The Nile mirrors the Milky Way in their mythology, with pyramids as terrestrial counterparts to Orion. Giza's layout recreates the sky at a very specific moment, one that might commemorate the last time the constellation was at its lowest point in the precession cycle. That event, around 10,500 BC, also matches geological evidence of catastrophic flooding worldwide. Coincidence or intentional memorial? Later pyramids lacked this precision. While later rulers copied the pyramid shape, their versions are misaligned and crudely built. It's as if the original builders worked from knowledge that later generations lost. Even the Great Pyramid's inner chambers reflect celestial patterns. The king's chamber represents Orion, the queen's chamber Sirius, and the underground chamber the Duat underworld. This wasn't just architecture, it was a 3D map of their cosmos carved in stone. The implications are uncomfortable. If the alignment with 10,500 BC is deliberate, it suggests the Egyptians preserved knowledge from a civilization obliterated by time, or that they themselves are far older than we think. Mainstream history insists the Sphinx and pyramids date to 2500 BC, but the geology tells a different story. Water erosion patterns on the Sphinx's enclosure walls suggest heavy rainfall, something Giza hasn't seen since at least 5000 BC. Either way, the star alignments aren't debatable. You can measure them today with GPS and astronomy software. The question isn't whether the pyramids mirror Orion's belt, but why the match is perfect for an era long before Pharaoh Khufu. Archaeology calls it coincidence. The stones tell another story, one written in constellations and bedrock that we're only now learning to read. Next up, why the Sphinx's water-worn walls might rewrite everything we know about ancient civilizations. The Sphinx sits there with its missing nose and knowing smile, but its real secret isn't in the face, it's in the body. Mainstream archaeology says it's 4,500 years old, carved during Pharaoh Khafre's reign, but the stones tell a different story. Look at the erosion patterns on its sides and the enclosure walls around it. They're not pitted by wind and sand like you'd expect in a desert. They're deeply grooved with vertical channels, the kind caused by heavy, prolonged rainfall. The problem? Giza hasn't seen that kind of rain since at least 5000 BC. Geologist Robert Schoch studied these marks in the 1990s. His conclusion? The Sphinx's erosion matches patterns seen in places with centuries of heavy rain. The last time Egypt got that wet was during the Neolithic subpluvial, a period ending around 3000 BC, but the deepest erosion suggests even older damage, possibly dating back to 10,500 BC, when the Sahara was a green savanna. That's 8,000 years before Khafre supposedly built it. The climate data backs this up. Core samples from the Nile Delta show massive flooding around 12,000 years ago. Cave paintings in the Sahara depict rivers and animals that vanished millennia before the pyramids. If the Sphinx was exposed to rain for centuries before the desert reclaimed it, that would explain the watermarks. But it also means someone carved it long before any known Egyptian dynasty. Then there's the head. Proportionally, it's too small for the body. Most lion statues have matching sizes, but the Sphinx's head is about 30% smaller than it should be. Some researchers think it was originally a full lion, recarved into a pharaoh's likeness later. There's even a stela between its paws mentioning renovations by Khafre's workers. If true, the original sculpture could be far older, with only the face updated to honor a later king. The nearby Valley Temple adds more clues. Its massive limestone blocks show the same water erosion as the Sphinx, but the granite layers added later don't. The granite fits around the eroded limestone like patchwork, suggesting the temple's core is ancient, with newer additions. Some blocks weigh 100 tons, similar to the pyramid stones, yet they're precisely cut around existing weathering patterns. That's not something you do unless you're building onto something much older. Complicates things further. The Sphinx faces due east, aligning with the sunrise on the spring equinox. but in 10,500 BC it would have perfectly faced Leo the lion at dawn. That's not a minor coincidence. It's a direct match to the constellation's position during the Younger Dryas period, a time of global climate upheaval. Mainstream scholars dismiss this as imaginative math, but the alignments are too precise to ignore.
So who built it?
There's no evidence of a high civilization in Egypt that far back. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The Sphinx's erosion, the temple's layered construction, and the astronomical alignments all point to a much older origin. Maybe it was a monument to a forgotten culture wiped out by the Younger Dryas cataclysm. Maybe the Egyptians found it and repurposed it. Either way, the official timeline doesn't fit. The implications are uncomfortable. If the Sphinx is that old, it means a sophisticated society existed before recorded history, one capable of large-scale stonework and advanced astronomy. Later Egyptians might have inherited their knowledge, explaining why the early pyramids are the most precise. By Khafre's time, the original techniques could have been lost, leading to cruder copies. The Sphinx isn't just a statue, it's a time capsule. The watermarks, the mismatched head, the temple blocks. They're all pieces of a puzzle we're still putting together. Archaeology says it's 4,500 years old. The geology says otherwise. And until someone explains why those erosion patterns don't match the official story, the Sphinx will keep its secrets. Up next, what thermal scans found inside the Great Pyramid, and why no one can explain the massive void hidden near the king's chamber. The Great Pyramid isn't just a pile of stones with a few rooms inside. It's a maze of chambers, shafts, and hidden spaces we're still discovering. Walk through the main entrance, and you'll find yourself in descending corridors that lead nowhere, ascending passages that suddenly angle upward, and chambers placed precisely where they shouldn't be able to exist. The king's chamber alone contains mysteries. Its red granite sarcophagus is too large to have fit through the doorway, meaning the chamber must have been built around it. Above this room sit 5 relieving chambers, their purpose still unclear after centuries of study. A57 thermal scans revealed something unexpected. A massive void near the northern face of the pyramid, roughly the size of a commercial airliner. This anomaly runs at least 30 meters long, sitting directly above the grand gallery. The heat signatures show it's not just empty space. Its structure suggests deliberate design. But here's the problem. We can't reach it. No known passages connect to this void, and drilling through 4,500-year-old stones isn't exactly ethical archaeology. Robotic explorers have tried to map these hidden spaces. In 2002, the Jedi Project sent a small robot up one of the narrow shafts leading from the Queen's chamber. It found a small door with copper handles, an odd feature for something allegedly meant as ventilation. When cameras peered through cracks, they revealed hieroglyphic markings and what appeared to be tooling lines on the reverse side. These shafts aren't straight either. They zigzag at precise angles, suggesting they weren't just air channels but purposeful alignments. Theories about the void range from plausible to wild. Some archaeologists think it's a structural buffer to redistribute weight from the stone layers above. Others believe it could be an undiscovered chamber, perhaps containing artifacts or records from the pyramid's construction. More speculative ideas suggest it might house advanced technology or energy-conducting materials, though there's zero evidence for that beyond imaginative speculation. Other pyramids hint at similar secrets. At Bent Pyramid in Dashur, scans detected hidden passages not matching any known blueprint. The Red Pyramid showed unexpected voids in its core structure, but none compare to the scale of the Great Pyramid's hidden spaces. The difference is that later pyramids appear to have empty spaces by architectural accident, while Giza's voids seem intentionally placed. What's frustrating is how close yet unreachable these discoveries are. We have scans showing exact dimensions of the void. We know it's there, but without invasive procedures, we can't confirm whether it's a construction quirk or a purpose-built space. The technology exists to explore it. Miniature drones with LiDAR could map every inch without touching a single stone. But getting approval for that kind of investigation in Egypt's tightly controlled archaeological environment is another matter. The official line is caution. Egyptologists warn against sensationalism, pointing out that voids occur naturally in large stone structures. But even they admit the Great Pyramid's hidden space aligns too perfectly with known chambers to be random. The thermal anomaly follows the same angle as the ascending passageway beneath it, implying deliberate placement. Some researchers suspect these voids explain how builders accessed upper chambers during construction. Temporary spaces could have housed counterweights or lever systems later sealed off. But that doesn't account for the sheer size of the newly discovered void. It's larger than any practical construction need would require. Here's what we know for sure. The pyramid contains spaces no modern explorer has entered. Whatever lies beyond those stones, whether empty architectural features or untouched chambers, represents the last great mystery of Giza. Every scan raises more questions. Why place a void exactly there? Why build shafts too narrow for humans but with carefully finished walls? Why hide copper handles behind stone doors? The pyramid guards its secrets well. After centuries of exploration, we've mapped less than 30% of its internal structure. Ground-penetrating radar reveals anomalies throughout the base, suggesting networks of tunnels like veins in stone. But until we develop non-invasive ways to explore further, or until Egypt greenlights more aggressive scans, these voids will keep their mysteries. One thing's clear. Whoever built this structure thought in 3 dimensions we're still unraveling. The precision of hidden spaces matches the perfection of visible ones. That's no accident. It suggests every chamber, every shaft, even the voids we can't reach, were placed exactly where they're meant to be. And we're likely generations away from understanding why. The pyramids don't just defy time. They defy explanation. After centuries of study, we still can't replicate their precision with modern tools. The voids inside, the star alignments, the erosion patterns on the Sphinx, they all whisper questions we can't answer. Maybe the Egyptians knew techniques we've forgotten. Maybe they inherited knowledge from something older. Here's what's certain. History isn't as settled as textbooks claim. The more we learn, the less we understand. So next time you see the pyramids, don't just wonder how they were built. Wonder what else we've gotten wrong. The stones aren't talking, but they're still listening.